Well, the only hope is on the United States heavily sanctioning Moraes under the Global Magnitsky Act that can weaken his power a little bit and give a chance of Brazilian institutions to react. There's absolutely zero hope Bolsonaro will get a fair trial.
Joining me now to break down this global phenomenon is the host of the Paulo Figueiredo Show, Paulo Figueiredo, also the president of New York Young Republican Club, Gavin Wax. So, Paulo, we saw President Bukele issue this viral tweet that we are seeing a judicial coup in the United States. Eduardo Bolsonaro broadened that in social media remarks, talking about how the judicial coup is also present in Brazil. Do you see commonalities where judges are servicing as a resistance to the popular will of the people?
Oh, that's for sure. There's a name for it. It's juristocracy. So instead of democracy, which is the rule of the demos, the Greek word for people, you have juristocracy, which is the judiciary ruling the country. And we've been seeing this dramatically in other countries. Israel is a great example. They tried to pass a reform for the judiciary that failed because the judiciary decided the reform was not valid. So it's a leftist strategy. They recognize they cannot win at the ballot box, so they rely on unelected bureaucrats, perhaps the most powerful faction of the deep state.
Wow. Would you agree with that assessment, that the judiciary is the most powerful feature of the deep state, Gavin Wax? And where have you seen that metastasize across Europe?
Oh, I would agree 100%. We're seeing it in Europe, most recently in Romania, where these constitutional court judges are invalidating candidates, invalidating elections. We've seen it in Poland, where former communists now on the bench have been imprisoning the political opposition, namely conservatives. We've seen it in Italy, where they've gone after Matteo Salvini for enforcing the law. They're doing the same now to members of the Meloni administration in Italy. We've seen it in Germany, where they've declared different parties, political groups, and politicians affiliated with the AfD to be right-wing extremists and trying to keep them out of elections and delegitimize them. This is a problem the entire Western world is facing, and it seems to be a desperate ploy by a movement in retreat. That movement is globalism. It's global leftism. They're losing at the ballot box. They're losing hearts and minds in media, in the culture, and their last attempt to punch back effectively is to use these unelected activist judges across the Western world to slow down the reforms, to slow down the mandate, and to slow down and prevent any sort of change being enacted by the elected representatives of the people. In the United States, that is President Donald J. Trump and his administration. In Europe, it's various different populist right-wing parties. So the situation is coming to a boiling point. It's very sad, and we need to fight back against it.
And I want to talk about what that fight looks like. Paulo, we have seen Justice Moraes in Brazil take these extraordinary, illegal, and I would say aggressive efforts against Elon Musk, against Rumble, against the Bolsonaros. I believe that the only proper response from the United States to what we are seeing in Brazil is to sanction Justice Moraes, to sanction him with every tool we have, to put the diplomatic pressure on Brazil so that you don't see the subversion of democracy here in our own hemisphere. Paulo, do you believe that the United States sanctioning Justice Moraes could have an impact on a judiciary more broadly, globally, to adhere to the rule of law and not exceed their jurisdiction?
Yes, absolutely, because no other country has reached the level of judicial overreach seen in Brazil. The real ruler of Brazil today is not a president, is not a democratic president. Lula is a socialist, yes, but he was put there by the Supreme Court Justice Moraes. Moraes, as you well mentioned, is that guy that looks like a James Bond villain, the bald guy that has a beef with Elon Musk. Moraes is the one that Congress in Brazil approved printed ballot receipts 3 times, but the Supreme Court, which Moraes is a justice there, one of the most important ones, blocked the implementation. The Supreme Court opened investigations against Bolsonaro simply for questioning the electronic voting systems, and now he cannot run for office by decision of the Supreme Court. So imagine this. Sounds familiar to Americans because it almost happened here. The most popular candidate from the conservative side cannot run for office because of the decision of a Supreme Court justice from the left. So that's the call. The court has invalidated a presidential pardon, for example, granted to Congressman Daniel Silveira, a right-wing congressman that was imprisoned by Moraes for criticizing him. And you have several other cases. I can do a whole show about how the Supreme Court of Brazil and other courts canceled decisions or things that Bolsonaro did as a president or advanced agendas from the left. Just to give you a simple example, the court in Brazil is going to decide next week if police actions in the very violent favelas, the slums of Brazil, are legal. They decided last year that the possession of drugs is illegal, contrary to the law in Brazil. They're deciding all sorts of things. They're regulating social media because Congress decided not to pass a bill regulating social media.
Well,
Moraes
it just sounds like they've become the lawmaking entity, not a review over whether or not there is an exceeding of jurisdiction on the part of lawmakers. It's an exceeding of jurisdiction in their own right. And Gavin Wax, as I look at the world, the only place where I see it has been defeated, where the coup was suppressed, was in El Salvador, where Nayib Bukele had to get a legislature elected with overwhelming majorities to clean up the corruption in the judiciary. Is there anywhere else where you've seen an effective pushback that should be instructive to what we're seeing now in Brazil and the United States?
Well, I would certainly agree that El Salvador is one of the few, if only, examples of such a successful pushback against a runaway judiciary, this sort of judicial overreach, this judicial tyranny, if you will. I know in Israel, it almost brought the entire country prior to the October 7th attack to the brink of a massive chaos because the Netanyahu government was trying to push forward a bill that would have reformed the judiciary. They have an insane system in Israel where judges basically appoint their successors. There's zero accountability. They're constantly overturning legislative and executive decisions. But I really can't think of anywhere else. I think we need to start to set the trajectory here in the United States by having Congress act, by having Congress defund some of these jurisdictions, these districts, judges, or even impeach them. We need to send a message. We need to set an example, and we need Congress to use its powers in this runaway federal judiciary. It worked for Bukele in El Salvador. He saved his country. Not only saved it, he's leading the way for it to really prosper and thrive because he got rid of this element in the government, in the administrative state, in the judiciary that was preventing the will of the people from being enacted. We need to follow that model here in the United States and across the broader Western world.
There is no question that the fate of Western civilization depends on it. Paulo Figueiredo, we have got a big, decision we're anticipating on March 25th from the Brazilian authorities regarding whether or not Bolsonaro will face charges. Is there any drama to that? Is there any sense that the court will do the right thing and wipe away these nuisances and allow democracy to proceed? Or is it your expectation that he will not be allowed to run for president and will indeed be jailed?
Well, the only hope is on the United States heavily sanctioning Moraes under the Global Magnitsky Act that can weaken his power a little bit and give a chance of Brazilian institutions to react. There's absolutely zero hope Bolsonaro will get a fair trial. They're running as fast as they can actually to consolidate power to the point that no sanctions or any actions from outside would undermine their authority. There's still a small window for diplomatic measures, but it's closing fast. They're working on consolidating power through imprisoning Bolsonaro, which is going to happen in the next few months, and also controlling social media and all the internet through a ruling they're going to probably decide in the next couple of months as well.
We are going to follow this closely because my working theory is that if we allow this to persist anywhere, it becomes the new touchstone for the regimes that want to deny the voters the choice in their leaders. If we allow it in Brazil, we're going to see a renewed effort from the Mark Elias crowd and the folks in the United States to stand in the way of our efforts to pick our own leaders, and you're going to see it all across Europe, and so we've got to fight it with the tools that have been laid out. Paulo Figueiredo, Gavin Wax, thanks so much for joining me on the program.